So now that we have the background, we have our main scene a little bit here, right? We already have our tentacles, we have some rocks laying down, we have a studio, and our camera position seems to be quite fine. So now I want to fill up our scene with some small little details, which makes it look like it's underneath the water, right? So let's create some seaweed. It's going to be quite simple, and I actually like to create a new collection. So create a new collection and just rename it to seaweed. And in this new collection, we're just going to click on Shift C here. So our 3D cursor is back in the middle, and then add a plane. This is going to be our seaweed. So seaweed. And I only want to work on the seaweed for right now. So if you select this seaweed plane, click on Shift H, you can see that everything else just gets hidden, right? Perfect. So rotate this around the x-axis for 90 degrees. Go to the front view, which is 1, and then just scale this a bit up. We should make some kind of leaf out of this. It's quite simple, so don't worry too much. You're just gonna scale this a bit down, move it a bit up maybe, and let's look. Something like this might work great. I want to have some extra edge loops here, and this is quite handy for the animation that we're gonna make later. So I'm also gonna extrude one little part up here and then merge it together at center. Yeah, and this is our little seaweed leaf. For the seaweed, we used some modifiers, so let's use a subdivision modifier. So subdivision surface. You can see that now it gets a bit nicer and smooth, and I like to use the wave modifier. So the wave modifier is gonna do our animation. And let's grab an extra little section out of here, and this is going to be the timeline. If we play the timeline, you can just do this by pressing space. You can see that we have an animation. Right now the animation starts to play from here, and it is a wave animation. I don't really want it to go around every axis, and when we go to solid viewport shading, you can see a little bit better what's going on, but you can see that it's it is animated, but it is a little bit aggressive, and it doesn't really look like any seaweed that is nicely floating inside the water. So that's what we're gonna do now. First of all, you can let it just keep playing and play around with the options inside the wave modifier. First of all, I'm gonna turn off the X, so we just have this going on. And now you can play around with the height, as you can see here. The width, which makes the width of the waves, let's say, bigger. And you have narrowness. You can play around with these options. And of course also in the time, we can put the speed a bit down, because underwater we know it is nice and mellow. Right, so this actually already looks cool. So I'm gonna just keep it at this here. I only turned down the speed, it was fine for me. So let's create the material for the seaweed. Let's click on new. This is going to be the seaweed material. Here we have it. You can just do a basic darker green color if you like to, or you can use multiple colors. So we can do a mix RGB. We can mix these with a Voronoi texture, or however you say this. So this goes into here. One of them is going to be a dark green color, and one of them is going to be a little bit brighter, maybe even towards the yellowish. And here you can see you get some cool effects already. You can play around with the scale, but it's just a little bit more interesting than literally just one singular color. Roughness I did a bit higher, I think, but you can even throw this into the roughness, so some parts are more shiny than other parts. That's all up to you. Just play around with this to whatever you want. I might want a little bit more green in here though. Maybe I switch these colors around, make this one a bit brighter, if that helps. No, doesn't help at all. Doesn't matter. This is kind of what we're doing. So that is our seaweed. Very cool. So now we have this cool animation going. It's still floating, and that is kind of what we were looking for. Now what you want to do is you want to implement them in your scene. So here we have one part. And what you can do is you can just, let's place them here. The cool thing is, if I duplicate this, I can just move the bit around, but the animation will still work. The thing is, at this point, they are having the exact same animation, and that is just a little bit unbelievable. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select one of them, and then just in the time put the offset a little bit different. Okay, it doesn't have to be too much, but a little bit already goes a long way. And then you can just select them both and then do whatever you want with them, but at least they don't look all the same. So just yeah, place them in your scene. You can fill it up to whatever you want. You can see my little preview that I of course spent a bit more time into creating kind of a coherent scene, but I just want to show you guys the basics, and of course you guys, I'm gonna throw in some extra different materials. So let's create these air bubbles. I want to create also a whole new collection, so just a new collection, and just do like air bubbles or bubbles, whatever you want. And we are gonna create a icosphere. Okay, so just scale it a bit down and then shade smooth. This is gonna be inside this new collection, and it's just gonna be a bubble. So the air bubble has a very simple material, so let's rename it to bubble. Delete the principal shader and just get a glass BSDF in here, goes into the surface, and that's it. So it seems quite easy. I'm gonna move it a bit backwards because later on we're gonna play a little bit around with the depth of field. So put them a little bit in the back. So the animation itself is quite simple, but we need to kind of duplicate it over and over because we cannot just put it on every single one of the bubbles, okay? So let's start with this one. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our first frame. Here, click on I and then location, because we only want to animate the location. Then this one we're gonna change to the graph editor, and here we can see that because we just did one little keyframe, it's just gonna be the same keyframe all over, right? So it's just a straight line. Now, what we can do is we can go to the modifiers, make sure, let's select the x-axis first, right? Then to the modifiers, add modifier and add some noise. And here we can see that we have a noisy red line, which is the X location. So if we now play it, you can see that it kinda moves around the X-axis, right? It goes way too quick, so you can play around with these options. And here we have the scale. So the scale does a lot, right? So if we move the scale up, you can see that now it goes way slower. It needs to be even more up here. This seems better, in my opinion. And you can also play around with the strength. So if you want it a little bit less strong, and that essentially means it goes less to the right or left in this case. Yeah, I think I like this. So you might have already noticed that it only works on one axis, right? So if I want to also go to the Z axis, I need to also add a modifier for that. So noise, again, the scale needs to be way bigger, and then we can also play around with the strength to make it a bit more flat, right? A bit flatten it a bit down. And now you can see that it moves around the Z axis and the X axis. I don't think the Y axis is necessary in this case. And yeah, that is this. If you want to duplicate these little spheres, as I have here, what you just need to do is you just need to duplicate this one. The problem is you can see that it snaps right back into place, right? So what you want to do is you want to move it away, then create a new keyframe, lock rod scale, delete the first keyframe, and you can keep it here or move it back. But now it is into place, and now it starts to move from here, okay? If you just duplicate it and then you move it away, let's say, and now I'm gonna play it, it snaps back into the original place because here is of course our location that we have set up. So yeah, move it away, scale to whatever you like, then make sure you create a new keyframe, lock rod scale, delete the first keyframe, and here we have a new position, but the movement is still going. So those are the little bubbles that we were talking about. The next thing that we want to do is we want to get some last materials on these rocks, and then maybe I want to show you some depth of field, and at the end we can animate these tentacles. So let's create some materials for these rocks. I will go back here and put this to, what should we do? Shader editor. Then select a big rock here, click on new, and this is going to be a rock material. So rock 1. And what I like to do here is I like to again play around with the Voronoi texture, or however you say it. So Voronoi here. I'm gonna mix it with 2 principal shaders in this case, okay? And that is because I want a different roughness between both of them. So let's add a mix shader, mix these two. One of these colors is going to be quite dark, quite blackish, so here, but still I want to go towards the blue, okay? Then this one we can go a little bit more greenish, I guess. Also quite dark. I don't want to have too much difference between them. Maybe something like this. But we need to connect our Voronoi with our mix shader. And here we can start playing around with the looks of our Voronoi, right? So our texture. So here, let's do 4D. Let's look what that looks like. We can put the scale higher if we want. I like this effect. And then also let's go to the color ramp and play a little bit around with these bad boys. So something like this. Yeah, this actually looks cool. So something like this would work great. And the cool thing about having these two principal shaders is that we can still change everything in these principal shaders themselves. So if I want to go all the way up in my roughness with this black, I can do that. And if I want to have more of a shininess on these, on this blue part, that is also totally possible. So I think this is a very cool rock material. And we can give it to more of them. So this one has the rock material, and let's also do this one. And for this material, I actually am gonna reuse this one here. So this is gonna be tentacle gold. Then I'm gonna duplicate it and just rename it to rock gold. And I think I make it a little bit more reddish or brown. Let's look here. This looks quite cool. And maybe put our roughness down, so 0.1. And then, this is gonna be the color for all of these bad boys. But that's all up to you guys, right? So I like this color. You don't have to like it. You can just do whatever you want there. Oh, not tentacle gold, but we have our rock gold here. Awesome. So, kind of fits. I like it. So essentially we have everything except our tentacles. So let's go to animation. And one thing that you gotta keep in mind is if you want to animate something, you gotta go be in pose mode. So if you are inside object mode, you need to select an armature here. And then go to pose mode. And then of course we need to move this one around. One thing though, in my case, I have my tentacles quite low down here. And because we have like a chain of 8, right? It moves all the way down. You can see that instead of it here being kinda stuck, it actually moves through the floor, which is kinda weird. So in this case, I might go back to object mode and actually move this armature a bit up. So this is actually the top, right? This does move it outside of the camera view, and you can do multiple things to fix this, okay? So the first thing that you might think about is pulling the camera back. That is totally fine. We can also scale down our tentacles a little bit. And yeah, those are two great options. So just choose between them and move this a bit up and then scale them down. Okay, so now you can see the full effect and it works way better, right? Like the bottom just stays in its place. So sorry for me just messing up a little bit there, but that's kind of what you're doing. So what you want to do is you want to go here and with object mode, you want to select one of the armatures, then go to pose mode, and then you can start posing your tentacle. So in this case, this little screen here on the left is quite important because we are looking from our camera here, right? So in this case, I think my camera can go even a little bit more up. So just select your camera and then click on, of course you gotta go outside of pose mode, but move the bit up here, and then go back. And why do we need to do this? Or why do you want to look here? That is because you need to make sure that these tentacles do not go outside of here, right? Maybe it is a decision that you want to make, but I would like to keep them inside. So in this case, my starting position is gonna be here. I like that. Keyframe 1. Then I click with this selected, I lock rod scale. Then our animation in this case is gonna take like 120 frames. So go here, 120, and our end frame could be all the way over here, right? Or maybe even go a bit backwards. I lock rod scale. So now what you're able to see from 0 to 120, our tentacle moves. So you might think like, a little bit of a boring movement. I agree. What about around frame 60? We actually do something else. So around frame 60, I am gonna move it maybe a bit down here. Whatever. Let's see what it does. It's just playing around with it. So it first goes down, and then it goes towards the 120. So this already looks way cooler, right? And you want to do this for every single one of them. Make sure they don't go inside of each other or inside of any of these rocks or yeah, seaweed what we have in any of the objects that are in a scene and outside of the camera, and then you should be totally fine. So this is my animation in this case. Yeah, looks quite fun. And as last, I want to show you guys a little bit about the lighting. So normally I like to render inside cycles, and I can't really showcase that, sadly. That's just because my computer is just too slow. It just doesn't work, and especially with the rendered viewport shading and then also recording this, it just doesn't work. So I'm gonna show you a little bit inside Eevee, and it's kind of the same workflow. So let's go here into the viewport shading so we can actually see what is happening. And normally when you have a scene, you have something like this. And yeah, let's go to the shader editor, and from object you go to world. Okay, so here we have our background. Maybe with you it's a little bit brighter, that's totally fine. But we want to use an environment texture here. So environment texture, and we're gonna choose an HDRI. Okay, so in this case I have my HDRIs here, and I get them from HDRI Haven. I'm gonna scroll a bit down, and I'll choose the symmetrical garden, and here you can see the symmetrical garden. So now the scene is actually picking up light from this HDRI, and it already looks way better. But you can of course play around with these options. So maybe like kinda you like the HDRI, you like what colors it has, but maybe the reflections just do not really match up what you want to showcase. Well, you can just use a texture coordinate and a mapping node. Combine these two together, so generated goes in here, and effector goes in here, and then we can start to rotate it and see what the light is doing to our scene, right? I do have a little light in this scene here, I can see. I want to get rid of it just so I actually see what my HDRI is doing by itself. It already looks way cooler than just a blend lighting, right? And yeah, that is a thing that I really like to use. So you can also play around with the strength, and you can always add some extra lights in here. So let's say I'm just gonna add a light, and we're gonna do a let's do an area light here. I want some more light down here. I'm gonna scale it a bit up, and then in your object data properties of your light, you can play around with the power. You can even play around a little bit with the colors. So if you want some purple in here, could also look cool. So these are all just things that I can speculate right now, which could look cool. But play around with this, because it's quite cool what you can do with lighting. Okay, lighting is very underappreciated in my opinion. You can do so much with good lighting. So play around with those options. And that is essentially how I render this. So if you really want to start rendering this, you just go here into the output properties, you choose a nice folder, create a new folder. So let's go here, click on new. This is gonna be the render Eevee, render Eevee, and then whatever tentacle. Then go inside of here, click on accept. And if you now go to render animation, you will render the whole animation. One more thing that I also did is I used some depth of field, right? So if you go to your camera, you can go here into the object data properties of your camera, and then you have a little section here which is called depth of field. Why did I do this? Well, I wanted these little air bubbles, or just bubbles, to be a little bit more blurry. It just looks very cool. So what I like to do in this case, because I have multiple objects, I need to choose a object to focus upon. In this case, I actually want to just grab an empty, use a plane axis, scale it a bit up, and now if I select my camera and choose this empty, so empty, then the object focus is this empty. It is kind of in the middle of all these tentacles, which is great. But now I can play around with the f-stop and make certain parts which are far away from this empty blurry. So in this case, you know, this part in the back is more blurry. And everything close to my empty is quite nice and sharp, right? So you can even like move this empty around and you can see what it does to our whole scene. You can also move objects further away if you want them to be more blurry. So maybe I want to put these here. Of course, because there are the bubbles and they have the animation, you need to apply a new location to them. Otherwise, they just snap back, as you can see right here. So that is how I made them more blurry. And that is essentially everything that I want to showcase. I really hope I get my new computer soon. Just so I can also showcase these a little bit more into depth and detail inside cycles. But I hope you guys can see what I'm trying to showcase. If you came this far, please like and subscribe. And yeah, love you guys. See ya.